Hello everyone, I hope I'm online. I just had a little glitch there. Was notified that I guess they didn't get my image right. Today's been a bad day. I had lower back pain again. Still walking around with my cane in the mornings when it's cold, when you wake up cold. Bad stuff. One thing I could recommend for those of you who have back pain, uh, just a tip, um, sleep face down. It relieves the pressure on your back, one. And then the other one is that it allows you to roll over in bed better than when you're face up. And the other one is easier to get out of bed easier. You put one leg down, you don't have to use that muscle back there. You just let your legs drop over the side of the bed. But today I feel a little better after sleeping face down. I think I'm being a little better. Caught a little bit of cold, so I don't know if the gods are against me. Maybe they're angry that I'm giving away their secrets, the rope model. Like Prometheus, they hanged him and had this eagle or bird to eat his liver every day. I hope they don't torture me like that. I've got enough with the back pain. Anyways, we're going to talk about good old Michio Kaku today. I hope you're looking forward to him. But before that, I get into that, I want to do a little, yeah, thanks, Tesla. I want to do a little summary of the Neanderthals, of what I talked about the other day. Just quickly run through that. Okay, so let me start there. Here's a summary of what I discussed the other day. Essentially, I discussed trade, admixture, clothes, tools and weapons, and whether any individual during even up to the and including the upper Paleolithic was a vegetarian, ate any vegetables whatsoever. Okay, so let's go with that. Trade. This is what I got to say about trade. Again, this is my take on it. You don't have to believe me. Hopefully you don't. Okay, trade never happened. Okay, that's what I say. In the jungle, out there in the middle of the forest, in the middle of nowhere, there is no 911. So you don't trust anyone. And so to say that you're going to go in there and trade meat for a bunch of seashells, this is, as far as I'm concerned, it's called idiocy, whoever suggests that. Besides, basal hunter-gatherers have nothing to trade. They make their own tools and weapons, and no hunter-gatherer trades food. He doesn't go in there, put a little farmer's market because he's got some leftover meat and say, well, look, you give me some veggies or some seashells or your wife or whatever, and I'll give you some meat. No way. Territory, all clans, both Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals were formed into clans. They never invented the tribe. There was no such thing as a tribe. The worst enemy of a clan is another clan of your own species, let alone from a different species. Okay? And then there's always the barrier of language. What are you gonna, what are you gonna say? Ooh, I want that. Just point and say, I want that. I'll give you my spear for this. No, it never happened. And then there was a difference, a little less important, but there was a difference between the nomadic Cro-Magnons that were moving into Europe and the sedentary Neanderthals that were living in Europe for thousands of years. Okay, so that's one issue. The other issue, important issue, is admixture. Okay, and again, this is my take on it. I hope you don't believe me. Again, no trust. Trust is number one. No wild animal trusts any other wild animal out there. Okay, and so you're not going to have sex with a woman. First, a woman would have to be, like I put a point down there, shouting range. A woman would not leave her clan beyond shouting range because that is her 911. She has to be able to shout, not because she's going to be raped, but because she could be killed by an animal. So you don't have this situation where anyone in the clan goes all by himself out in the middle of nowhere, because if he does, he never comes back. Maybe. Okay, that's one big possibility. There's the issue of the clan structure. Again, they were built into clans. They never abandoned the clans in the Upper Paleolithic, as far as I'm concerned. Territoriality. All clans guard their territory because that's what feeds them. So anyone who steps over the line, he's an enemy, even if he's from the same species but a different clan. That's it for him. The issue of clothes, that's a major one as far as I'm concerned, because the question is when were clothes invented? And there's a couple theories on that, and I'm just going to mention them so that you can do your own research on that. I did, but it's up to you to reach your own conclusions. One has to do with lice, the little bug that's on your body, lice. And there was a time about 175,000 years ago when lice migrated from the body. There were body lice, and they moved to hair lice. Okay, so these are two different types of lice. And that's got to do with, putting clothes on. Okay, so that's one issue you should investigate if you're interested in the subject. The other one, a little closer to our days, about maybe 40,000, maybe 50,000 years ago, they found the first needle. Okay, again, humans, not Neanderthals. Neanderthals never had any needles, which is very strange if they built clothes. And yeah, Neanderthals did not build clothes. That one I would take to the bank. Okay, I think it's safe to say that they had no clothes. Here's one little thing that puts it in perspective. Okay, and these were the Neanderthals. You could say Neanderthals, really, it comes even before then. It comes from the Heidelbergs that came before them, possibly antecessors, which came before them about 1 million years ago, and even before that with Homo erectus. And we had 800,000 years ago. 800,000 years ago, that's dated that way. In England, they had some kind of human ancestor. Maybe not our ancestor, but it depends on your view, okay? Essentially, what they had is 800,000 years ago. You see there in, where is this, Happisburg, okay? And Pakefield, about 700,000 years ago, they found some kind of remain, either footprints in one case and actual bones of mammoths in another case. And remember that the glaciers were all the way down to about just a little about where London is today. And because of that, there was a lake, and whoever was living there in those days, they were hunting mammoths and whatever they hunted in those days in that region. And there was a corridor going from France all the way to England. And that happened that occurred all the way to 220,000 years ago, where the English Channel was formed. Okay, and that's when the islands became separated from the mainland. And when that happened, whoever was in the English part eventually died out. They became extinct, and what remained were the Neanderthals on this side of that divide. Okay. So that's the general picture we have today, based on evidence and based on the analysis of time, of what happened with time. And again, these things, you got to be careful with time. Again, I mentioned that the other day. Okay, you got to be careful with time because time is a lot of it has to do with interpretation, where the context in which you find certain bones and the age of the caves and what animal existed, what plants existed, that sort of thing. So a lot of it is just guesswork, a lot of it. But you try to do as best as you can with the evidence that you have. That's all you can say. Okay, so those are the general numbers. Okay, about 800,000 years ago, there was some human kind of creature living in England, and if they were there, that's where the Neanderthals came from, because this creature, probably Homo erectus, there's another one called Homo antecessor, there's another one called Homo heidelbergensis, and these preceded or were the fathers or the forefathers of what was to become Neanderthal. And assuming we concede that line of evolution, then Neanderthal developed independent from man, who developed in Africa. That's the general picture today. And if that's the case, Neanderthal developed in Arctic weather from forefathers that also developed in Arctic weather. And the issue there is they could not have worn clothes. They simply got used to the cold, just like animals get used to the cold. And here, people say, well, can they withstand that much cold, Arctic cold? Well, here, let me give you evidence. Okay, here we have evidence, okay, for those who are skeptic. If I can get this thing up here. Oh, let's see if I can get this thing in there. Give me a second here because it got stuck somewhere. One second, and I'll be back with you here. If I can get this thing in here. Here it is. I don't know why I didn't accept it. Okay, here you have it. That's a wolf sleeping in the snow. Now you say, well, hold it. Isn't he going to freeze to death? How can he sleep in the snow? Doesn't he have a little better mattress to sleep upon? No, these animals have a thick layer of fat. They're used to living in the cold, and they can withstand the cold. And there's no reason why a Neanderthal could not withstand the cold with, 10 layers of fat underneath his skin. So to say that that this animal called Neanderthal invented clothes and wore, furs on top of his back and shoes on his feet, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Neanderthals did not wear clothes, and we did. And that would have been a little bit of, suspicious to both species, okay? Hold it, that monkey's not wearing clothes, and the monkey's looking at us and saying, hold it, that monkey, what is he wearing? What did he put on? Is he dressed for Halloween or what? So no, okay, no clothes. The other issue is this issue of language, okay? They couldn't have had a love talk. It would have had to been, I don't know, rape, maybe a one-night stand. And the question is whether you build a species from that one-night stand or you get rid of a species. Like in this case, they say that the Neanderthals disappeared because they had sex with us. Totally retarded. And, the reason all these theories come around, because, let me just finish there. Mitochondrial DNA, we have no mitochondrial DNA from Neanderthals. Several studies, 9 of them at least, show that there's no mitochondrial DNA from Neanderthals. That means we inherited nothing from Neanderthal mothers, because that's the individual that passes on the mitochondrial DNA to her offspring. No one today has Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA. They never tell you that. That's swept under the rug, even though that went on for about 15 years at least that they did studies on that and they finally gave up. The other one is we have no Y chromosomes. That means we have no males have no Neanderthal fathers, okay? Because the Y chromosome is passed from father to son. And so we have no Neanderthal fathers, we have no Neanderthal mothers. You figure it out. Then the other one is that, the first objective evidence that human entered Cro-Magnon, right? Us, our forefathers, more than likely, right? Entered Europe about 35,000 years ago. That's objective evidence. That's in Romania, a cave known as Pestera Cu Oase. And they found a skull there and lower jawbone. And they said, this guy's Cro-Magnon. He's like us. And that's the first human we have objective evidence of entering Europe 35,000 years ago. The Mousterian technology, which is what the Neanderthals had, disappeared 40,000 years ago. That's the best estimate we have, okay? So there was a difference between when the last Mousterian tools were used by Neanderthals and the first human that entered Europe. And my take, I'll give you my take, is that the only reason we never entered Europe is that whoever did enter, which I'm sure a lot of clans try to enter, just roaming or got lost in there or following the herds or whatever, they were slaughtered by the Neanderthals. That's why we can't find them. That's why we the Neanderthals did not allow anyone in their territory. And we went east because there was no one to stop us, but we didn't go north to Europe until the Neanderthals were gone. So no sex with them, no trading with them. Okay, so those theories I consider mentally retarded. Whoever proposes that, they had better have good reason to say that. And genetics is not a good reason. And I explained that last time. They say, oh, we got 2 or 3% Neanderthal blood in us. Yeah, we also have, I don't know what percentage of fruit fly DNA in us, and I cannot imagine us. No, I don't think so. I don't think that ever happened. But today we have the red wolf, and they can't tell. The geneticists cannot tell whether it's a unique species or it's a hybrid between the gray wolf and the coyote. So if they can't tell that with today, with 3 animals that are alive, much less can they tell through genetics that we had sex and that our forefathers were Neanderthals 40,000, 35,000 years ago. No way. No, they're just, and the reason, again, they're pushing all these theories is they have no solution to the issue of extinction. Okay? They have no solution to extinction. Why? Because there was a long debate, decades worth of debates between all those people. Just about everyone thought it had to do with humans getting rid of Neanderthal one way or the other. And the suggestions were that we outcompeted them or that we killed them outright. And then finally they came up and they zeroed in on this issue of love. They said, no, we had sex with them and they diluted, they dissolved into our bigger population. That's the answer we have today. And again, they had no way of fixing this problem. The way they had to introduce the geneticists, and they said, oh, we'll solve the problem for you. We'll just look at the genetics and we'll tell you how Neanderthals disappeared. And the genetics for Neanderthals became a cottage industry starting 2010 when the Max Planck Institute here in Germany, led by Svante Pavo and his group, they essentially became the judges, and they said, look, we'll solve it for you. We descend from the Neanderthals. That's it. That's how they solved it. And the question for Mr. Pavo and his group is, did Heidelberg disappear because he mated with Neanderthal? Did Homo antecessor, did he disappear because he mated with Heidelberg? Did Homo erectus disappear because he mated with either Homo heidelbergensis or with antecessor? Is that how species die? They have sex with the next generation? So this is the problem. The problem is they haven't solved anything. And the fact that we have 2 to 3% Neanderthal commonality with Neanderthal DNA, hey, we separated from the same tree. So yeah, we had better have some commonality with the Neanderthals. Okay? And so this is all politics. And I'll tell you something else, which I mentioned in a video in the series that I made about the Neanderthals, and that's that Times Magazine in 2007, I think it was, right? About 3 years before Pavo published his report, 3 years later, they already made him one of the 100 most influential people on the planet. I think it was for Science, but I'm not sure now. But they mentioned him as one of the most he was in the top 100 most influential people on the planet. That's before he discovered this. Why? Because Times Magazine realized that this guy was going to have a lot of power in whatever came out of his mouth. And he obviously did. He created this cottage industry for geneticists, and now everybody is talking about, us being Neanderthals, and every dummy out there, goes out there and tries to find out how much Neanderthal blood he has in him. And, I always say, you don't have to. You more than likely, you have 50% Neanderthal blood in you, and it all probably comes from your mother's side. So they created this cottage industry. That's all it's about. It's about politics. It has nothing to do with science as far as I'm concerned. They can't justify interbreeding in the wild. That's bottom line. Okay, let's go on with Michio Kaku, okay? And this fellow, he's, they call him a physicist. And to me, that's that's not offensive. It's just ridiculous. I look at this as I look at Michio as a stand-up comedian that I can accept, but physicist, I don't know. Well, here's his bio. Okay, this fellow, according to the Wikipedia, is a theoretical physicist, a futurist, and a popularizer of science, a science communicator. And so you look at this and say, well, science communication, what is that? It says, is the practice of informing, educating, sharing wonderment, and raising awareness of science-related topics. And they do what is called outreach, and that's typically conducted by professional scientists, supposedly this guy, to non-expert audiences. In other words, they popularize science, okay? And, you know, I don't know about Michio. To me, this fellow has little to do with science, has little to do with physics. And so about science communicator, he communicates science. What kind of science does he communicate? And let me tell you why I have that idea. Okay, look at this. Okay, here's proof, evidence. I always like to present proof and evidence to convince people. Okay, so here, let's convince people with proof and evidence. Here we have good old Richard Feynman. Okay, and what does Mr. Feynman say? Well, he says there is no, this is in one of his papers, okay? You can find it on the internet. There is no model of the theory of gravitation today other than the mathematical form. The more we investigate, the more laws we find. And the deeper we penetrate nature, the more this disease persists, okay? Every one of our laws is a purely mathematical statement in rather complex and abstruse mathematics, okay? It is impossible to explain honestly the beauties of the laws of nature in a way that people can feel, okay? You're not feeling it, right? Without their having some deep understanding of mathematics. There is no explanation of the law. What they have is mathematical descriptions. They cannot explain a single phenomenon in which an invisible entity is, Mother Nature uses an invisible and intangible entity as a mediator. So since they can't identify that, they say we don't understand it. And since they do everything with particles, they end up trying to explain everything in terms of particles, and it don't work. That's what happened. It just don't work with particles. And so when they finish, they say, well, we don't understand it. But then right after, they say, oh, we do understand it. See, we saw the other day how Brian Greene, he says that NASA sent the Gravity Probe B, I think it was 1971 or 79. They sent it out there and they proved Einstein's theory. I don't think Einstein would agree with him, but this is what they claim. And that is that the Earth, when it rotates, when it spins, it drags space around with itself. Okay, so they're dragging space around with themselves, right? They put a gyroscope up there, a very accurate gyroscope, and they said, look, the gyroscope's moved. That's proof, evidence, confirmation that that space is warped around the Earth, and that not only it's warped, but that Earth drags this space around in circles around itself. Like, you know, like a whirlpool when you go to your bathroom or your toilet and you let go of the water and, you know, you get that twirl and goes down the drain. Same thing. The Earth spins and drags space around. So, yeah, the mathematicians are saying that space is a thing. They say that time is a physical entity as well, and that it is this warped time which prevents the Earth from flying out of the solar system. Why? Because it's part of this space-time, a depression caused, in our case, by the sun, and the Earth rolls around this depression like a little ball around a roulette. And so that's why the Earth doesn't fly out of the solar system. Therefore, there's a wall of curved space preventing our exit. That's essentially it, in a nutshell. That's the physical interpretation, okay? And so the issue here is, here you have Feynman, he tells us, look, we don't understand anything. We can't explain anything. If you want to, quotation, understand, you have to take math. Otherwise, you won't understand. And so he's telling you this, okay? He cannot explain it in simple language. Then he goes with another thing, which a lot of you saw out there, and that's his idea of magnetism, okay? He can't explain. He says, you have to know what it is you're permitted to understand and allowed to be understood and known, and what it is you're not. So some things you're not allowed to understand. Whoa, I love that one. That's just one of the things you'll just have to take is electromagnetic repulsion and attraction. I can't explain that attraction in terms of anything else that is familiar to you. I can't do a good job, any job of explaining magnetic force in terms of something else that you're more familiar with, because I don't understand it in terms of anything else that you're more familiar with as well. He doesn't know what gravity is. He doesn't know what magnetism is. Is there anything that he does know? I mean, that he can tell us about? And here, let me put this thing back in here. Where is it? Okay, here it is. Here's another one. They slip. Here's another statement from good old Feynman. He doesn't know about gravity. He doesn't know about magnetism. Let's see if he knows something about this. He says, there was a time when the newspaper said that only 12 men understood the theory of relativity. I don't believe there ever was such a time. He's a Nobel Prize 1965, okay? Physics, mathematical physics. I don't believe there ever was a time. On the other hand, I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics. Do not keep asking yourself if you can possibly avoid it, but how can it be like that? Nobody knows how it can be like that. The more you see how strangely nature behaves, the harder it is to make a model that explains how even the simplest phenomena actually work. So theoretical physics has given up on that. Theoretical physics doesn't do explanations. They don't do mechanisms anymore. They don't spend a dime on that. They consider that philosophy. They consider that, well, that's just your opinion. So you can invent angels if you want. They'll accept it. They don't care, because all they want to do is math. They say, look, we're just trying to look for relations for what the equation looks like, what that can describe. And what are they describing? They're describing the visible things that they observe, the consequences of whatever's happening in the invisible world out there. But as far as the invisible world, they have no clue. And the solution was simple for these last 10,000 years, very simple. You got to make the invisible visible. You have to tell me what physical object is mediating the transaction. And there's got to be something in there, for otherwise you're introducing spirits in that same space. That's how simple it is. You either go back to spirits and say God does it with magic, or you put a physical entity and then you do science. You can't have it both ways. There's got to be a physical entity. And yeah, they do put physical entities. In one case, they put particles. And in the case of quantum, and they also use it in general relativity. But in general relativity, they use space-time. And what they do is they turn this concept called space-time, they turn it into a physical object and talk about warping this physical object, like a mattress, like a fishnet or whatever, canvas, trampoline. And so what these people are doing is they're turning concepts into objects just to get past the explanation. And when you put them against the wall, they say, well, we don't understand it. We're just using these words to get our thoughts across of what we think the math represents. So they have no clue. And the explanations they give are all retarded. They recognize that. They say, no, we don't have any answers. We have no explanations for mechanisms. Okay, so is that it? Well, we have one more testimony here, and this one comes from my good friend Susskind. I dealt with him the other day, okay? And what does Susskind say? Well, he says, yes, you and I evolved in a world of 3 dimensions. We can't visualize more dimensions. I can visualize 3 dimensions in my head, but I use X, Y, and Z numbers, right? Variables, to describe them mathematically. Now I go to 4 dimensions or 5 dimensions. I can't visualize them anymore. I can't say, now close your eyes and view in your head 5 dimensions, because I can't do it either. Okay? So we're stuck needing mathematics because evolution didn't equip us to be able to visualize quantum mechanics. It didn't equip us to visualize 11-dimensional space-time. Evolution did this to us. Well, maybe, just maybe, there are no such dimensions. Did he ever think about that possibility? Maybe there's only 3 dimensions, length, width, and height. Aside from the fact that they're not talking about dimensions, they're talking about number lines. Okay? But, so that's in a nutshell, but here's one more final piece of evidence. I like to introduce evidence to persuade and convince and recruit. So here we have this fellow. He's a professor at UC Santa Cruz, and he says, the most magical thing is that in quantum mechanics, an object can be in more than one place at the same time. Now, how's that for science and for physics, okay? So all these people, none of them have any idea how to explain phenomena out there that we started investigating, at least since the days of the Greeks. We're talking about over 2,000 years. These people cannot explain any of that. 2,000 years later, hundreds of thousands, millions of equations later, hundreds and thousands of books written on the subject, math, physics, etc., etc., etc. We still cannot explain the invisible world. The mathematicians have no idea what magnetism is. They have no idea what gravity is. They have no idea what electricity is. They have no idea whatsoever what light is. And for sure, they have no idea what an atom looks like or how it really does its little thing out there in that invisible micro world. So they don't know. Okay? They don't know, to use that word. They cannot explain. That's the real word. Okay? They cannot explain mechanisms. We're back where we started. We made no progress with the mathematicians in the last 10,000 years. My criticism of that is that we've got the wrong scientific method. We have to take a step back because their scientific method, their version of the scientific method, doesn't work. It don't work. And it don't work, I'll tell you why, because it's equations and experiments, and equations and experiments have nothing to do with science. What are you saying? What do you mean experiments don't have it? Yeah, just like that. Experiments, math, none of that has anything to do with science, with physics. Physics, we have to explain a mechanism. We have to explain how Mother Nature does her, especially her invisible stuff. We know all the visible stuff. We can tell that. We've described it and explained it, but we can't explain the invisible stuff. And the only reason for that is that we have the wrong people doing physics, and that's the mathematicians. They think they're going to zero in on how Mother Nature runs her shop by doing equations or by doing experiments. And both of them fail. Experiments fail because Mother Nature made her mediators invisible and intangible. Going to the lab, you're only going to be able to see the visible things, the tangible things. You're not going to see the invisible things. You're not going to be able to touch the intangible things, which she uses as mediators. So going to the lab is not going to solve your problem. You're just going to have to take a step back and visualize how she could be doing these magic tricks. And for that, you have to visualize the mediators. You have to make them visible. That's the only way. And the mathematicians never figured that out, at least in the last 400 years since the so-called scientific revolution, first. And second, they think they're going to reach an understanding of mechanisms. I guess that's how they originally thought about these things, through running experiments and doing equations. And that's the problem. That's why we have to redefine what science is. Science is not equations. Science is not experiments. Science is trying to figure out how Mother Nature runs this universe. And science is not a process. Because right now we have this notion, a lot of people have this notion that science is this process of seeking but never finding. Okay, you seek, you do investigations, but you never come up with anything. It's like you inch your way towards knowledge, to an understanding of the universe sometime in the future, infinite future, infinity, mathematical infinity. You never reach there. And so people have this notion that that's what science is, some kind of process, incessant process of discovery but never discovering, of seeking but never finding. No, we have to redefine that notion. Science is rational explanations. Give me an explanation of how Mother Nature runs her shop, how Father Universe runs his world, and we're done with science. We're done with physics. There is no more physics after that. Once we figure out the invisible entities, we're done with physics. And that's all that remains, because we have equations beyond rationality. We have equations upon equations upon equations. They've developed mathematics to ridiculous levels, manifolds and so much dimension analysis and such garbage that has no place in science. And they've gone through all this stuff and they still can't tell you how a magnet works. They can't tell you why the Earth doesn't fly out of the solar system, something that we've known at least I would say since the days of the Greek, right? And they can't tell you why Earth flies out of the solar system. They say, we'll never understand it. Then I shouldn't give you any more money to do research, maybe. Maybe I should cut the funding, Okay, so if none of these guys know anything, can't explain anything, what is this fellow Michio Kaku talking about when he says that, or that he's a physicist and that he's a popularizer of physics ideas, that he educates the public? What's he educating the public on if he's an ignoramus himself? Okay, so this might be the notion of an astrologer with his little crystal ball, the owl on his shoulder, the constellations behind him. I have a different view of this fella. I think he's more like this. I think he's a caricature of science. That's what it is, a caricature of science. So what does this caricature do? Well, he goes through the motions. He acts like he knows something about science. He gets into a lot of interviews, makes a lot of money doing all this stuff, right? And that's fine. That's his personal business. But what does he talk about? Well, he talks about nonsense. He talks about dark matter, dark energy, a mass effect. Mass effect? We'll find out. Psychokinesis. Telekinesis, you move things around with your mind. Is this science, or is this a caricature of science? Invisibility cloaks. That's what he says military are funding, because military is very interested in having their soldiers, their tanks be invisible in an era where tanks and soldiers probably are not going to play any role whatsoever. So I don't know why the military are funding that. I guess they want to have this spy that walks into the Kremlin invisible and he can listen to everything these guys say. I don't know. I don't know what the military are thinking. But yeah, I don't doubt for a second military are funding these projects. UFOs, extraterrestrials, why we haven't been contacted, Fermi's paradox, why no one has gotten in touch with us. For those who believe that, others believe that they have gotten in touch with us. And I think they're all at Cambridge University. Okay, so these two fellas, let's get rid of them. Okay, so what does Michio say? Well, these are some of the statements some of the statements he's made in interviews. And yeah, you got to hold on to your seat, because you might laugh to death, and I don't want to be responsible for that. Okay, if you die laughing. Okay, so here's the first one. Okay, and Michio says dark energy and dark matter represent the cutting edge of science. Woo! In fact, that's what I work on professionally. I work on something called string theory. The next vibration could be dark energy and dark matter. In other words, he's saying his strings are vibrations of energy or dark matter, and he says that's what the next vibration could be. In this room, the earth moves in a wind of dark matter. So there should be dark matter right here. We physicists have not yet found it, but we have to create it with a Large Hadron Collider. We're going to slam protons at energies not seen since the instant of Genesis itself. Genesis? Sounds like biblical talk. I guess he's talking about Big Bang. okay? And we hope to create higher vibrations of the strings, including dark matter. So you're saying dark matter is just a vibration of a string, okay? Dark energy is even more fantastic. Well, yeah, I didn't think there could be, but okay. It's intergalactic. It's what makes the universe accelerate in its expansion. So dark energy is basically the energy of nothing itself. So now you know, nothing vibrates. That's what these strings are. They're the vibration of nothing. Does that make any sense? I mean, are these people talking about science? Are they talking about physics? This is not even science fiction. You can't even call it science fiction. It's science. It's just irrational fiction. Irrational fiction. That we can understand. Now, some people might say out there, well, you know, I like to listen to him because it gives me ideas. I have more ideas in my head. And the problem is, you know, what ideas? These are, what he's done is taken you 10 feet off the ground. You're no longer touching the ground. You're no longer in touch with reality when you talk this kind of nonsense. First, the string is one-dimensional. There's no such monster. But let's concede. So now they're saying a particle is a vibration of the string. Okay, is it a vibration in the same axis? I mean, is it a two-dimensional particle? So no, now they have to vibrate it in different directions, right? Okay, so we vibrate it in different directions, and that's what they call a particle. So what is a particle? A particle is vibrations of a one-dimensional string. And it turns out they say these particles are zero-dimensional, point particles. And so we have a zero-dimensional particle made of vibrating one-dimensional strings, neither of the two which we can conceptualize or even visualize. So we got a problem because they're trying to use a physical object. They're trying to make you believe that they're introducing a physical object, right, to simulate whatever they're going to simulate in physics. Okay, you follow me? We have a problem. We have a problem because these people are starting off on the wrong foot to begin with. And then they give irrational explanations. They say, we can't see the dark matter. We can't see it because they're dark. You know, can't see the dark energy. Everything's dark. I think they're racist. That's all I can think of. They can't see any of the black people in the night. You know, so they say, oh, the black people, they're there, but we can't see them. We'll prove them one day. I'll prove it by running my car over them. You know. I mean, how do they plan to detect dark energy? How do they plan to detect dark matter? If they haven't defined the term, they don't even know what they're talking about. And here they're one step further looking for it in the night sky. And they're trying to detect it indirectly there. But there's they also try to do the following here. He explains that as well in I think this was from the same interview, okay? And he says the following. He says, believe it or not, dark matter and dark energy represent most of the universe. Every textbook in high school that you have to struggle with is wrong. Now he tells me. I mean, I should have had him as a teacher, not my other physics teacher who told me everything was right. Now he's saying many years later that everything I read was wrong. Okay? Every textbook says that the universe is made out of atoms. Wrong. We now know that 73% of the universe is made of out of dark energy, the energy of nothing. The energy of nothing. This is what he's saying. So nothing is made of energy. That pushes the galaxies apart. 23% is made out of dark matter, which we hope to create with a Large Hadron Collider. 23%, he says, I think here he made an error. I think he meant 3% is made out of stars, hydrogen, helium, and we humans make up 0.03, which I guess is too much anyways, of the known universe. He's got that wrong as well. Most of the universe is dark, okay? Okay, so that's his take on that. He says everything you learned in high school was wrong because we talk about matter, and matter is what does not exist or hardly exist in the universe. Everything is dark energy, dark matter, and maybe 3% is the rest of whatever is visible or tangible out there in the universe. Everything else, which is intangible, invisible, that's what the universe is made out of. And I thought it was space, and space is nothing. And they're saying, yeah, it is nothing, but it's the vibration of nothing. All these strings, the vibrating strings of nothing, or one-dimensional nothingness. I mean, you try to explain it. I can't even deal with that. Every time I read all this stuff, I have to go to the psychologist. psychiatrist because I go nuts with all this with all this nonsense. Okay, so here's he's got dark energy. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't feel it, you can't taste it, you can't hear it. Okay. Then he goes to dark matter. It's dark. You can't see it. It's also got no contrast, so you can't see it or touch it. They're all very ultra heavy. They push the universe apart. That's dark energy. Dark matter. It holds the galaxies together, supposedly, right? So this is their job. That's how they prove the existence of all this stuff. And then we come to dark mass. We have a new type of mass called dark mass, and it turns out that it's negative mass. Everything, it must be female. It must be because everything that's negative is female, right? Is for women, right? I would think, right? Because that's the next step. That's all they need to say. That it's feminine. Okay, so here he says it. He says this is what it is. He says the galaxy is hundreds of light years across. Okay, so to be able to send a message soaring through from one end of the galaxy to the other, normally we would say, "Ha, that's impossible." Until recently, now we believe that may be possible to harness something called negative matter. Negative matter is perhaps the dilithium crystals of Star Trek, perhaps the spites of the Dooms series. I looked that up. I don't know what he's talking about. I couldn't find spites. If any of you guys who play games out there know what a spite is of the Doom series, I did find sprites, but I can't see the context there. Some monsters or whatever. But he says it allows us to open gateways to the fabric of space and time. So the idea here is that with this negative matter, we're going to be able to open holes into the fabric of space and time. Okay, so get ready. The next step is negative matter. Those are the doors that let us get into space and time and travel from one end of the galaxy to the other. You see, Einstein's equations have a loophole. Oh, geez, and I thought they were so perfect, so ground in stone. I thought they were confirmed and proven. Now he's talking about loopholes to Einstein's equations. When you put negative matter into Einstein's equations, that's like putting an angel in there, or a spirit, I guess, then space and time curl up into knots. Time wraps up into a pretzel. Let me read that again in case you didn't catch it. Time wraps up into a pretzel. Okay, so we're twisting time now. All those seconds and minutes, we're twisting them around. We're not sure now how stable these gateways would be, but perhaps negative matter is the mass effect. Mass effect? What the hell is good old Michio talking about? What is this mass effect? And fortunately, we have some physicists. We have all these physicists out there that clarify all these things for you. These are the so-called physicists from the Stack Exchange, a prominent mathematics site. Okay. And this is what the Stack Exchange has to say about this mass effect. What is the mass effect? Again, all this comes from a lot of these games that are out there, okay? It says mass effect fields are created through the use of element zero. Whoa, element zero. Element zero can increase or decrease the mass content of space-time when subjected to an electrical current via dark energy. Okay? With a positive current, mass is increased. With a negative current, mass is decreased. Okay? You see where this is going, right? The stronger the current, the greater the magnitude of the dark energy mass effect. And another fella puts the mass effect is the pseudo-scientific, they have a gall to use that word scientific in this context, principle behind most of the technologies in the series. This series where they talk about mass effect. For instance, the mass relays allow faster than light travel by exploiting the mass effect. In the year 2148, explorers on Mars discovered the remains of an ancient spacefaring civilization. In the decades that followed, these mysterious artifacts revealed startling new technologies, enabling travel to the furthest stars. The basis for this incredible technology was a force that controlled the very fabric of space and time. Okay? What can I say? All these people have gone nuts. They know They're no longer have their feet on the ground. They're playing games out there, and from the games and from Hollywood movies, they get their education. And what is their education? Well, they don't even question space-time anymore. They take that for granted, and now they're drilling holes through it, with the mass effect. And they have this mass, which in a minute I'm going to explain that also can be made invisible with this invisibility thingy. And what happens? Well, these people are talking about going from one side of the universe to another, bypassing the speed of light. Obviously, the speed of light is a big problem for mathematical physics because it means we're not getting out of our planet. And in order to give hope to people, they say, look, not only can we get out of the planet, we can go to the other side of the universe, but we just don't have to travel, chugging along at the speed of light. We can just go through one of these mass effects or whatever nonsense and just drill a hole through space-time, short-circuit the itinerary, and you just, go through a different dimension or whatever, wormhole, whatever nonsense they come up with. What does any of this have to do with science anymore? And yeah, one of the reasons a lot of people have lost interest in so-called science and so-called physics, they watch the movie in Hollywood, they already know everything they need to know about the physical interpretations for black holes, dark energy, all that stuff, because they see it in the movies. What the directors in Hollywood have done, have taken some of the ideas coming out of mathematical physics, and they say, oh, this is science. So we're not doing a Hollywood make-believe. We're doing science here. We're doing documentary. And they build all these movies in which people travel faster than light, because you can't have a movie where the guy travels at the speed of light. He'll never make it to the nearest star, let alone see another civilization. No, you got to make him travel a lot faster than that. And the way you do that by cheating. You say, well, Einstein said you can't travel faster than light. Well, forget about Einstein. We're just going to go through another dimension, short circuit the itinerary. And so that's how they get to the other star, and they get there real quick, okay? And all this is magic. It's not even magic, it's fantasy. I call it irrationality, because it has nothing. I mean, if you leave it in Hollywood, fine, go ahead, watch your movie. Video games, fine, go ahead and play your game, do make-believe, make irrational make-believe. But for a guy like Michio Kaku to bring this up and say he's doing science that's all been proven and that mathematics doesn't lie, that's a stretch of the imagination. Okay, so next he talks about this invisibility cloak, just to see where he's going with all this stuff. He says, in a few decades, he's telling his interviewer, we'll have the Harry Potter invisibility cloak. You go like this, snaps his finger and says, and literally become invisible. Well, let me try it. Let's see. Did I become invisible? I don't know. You tell me. Anyone inside, he says, in a few decades, we hope to have a cylinder. Anyone inside the cylinder would be invisible because light would wrap around the object and return at the other end. Reform at the other end. The military is funding these projects right now. They realize invisible soldiers, invisible tanks, invisible airplanes are much better than stealth bombers, which you can actually see with a naked eye. Okay, so they're allegedly developing this technology. I've read several papers on this thing. There are many groups around the world, Japan, etc., the Russians, they're trying to develop this technology where people become invisible. There's many mathematicians out there who don't believe that we'll actually be invisible, in the sense that, like the Invisible Man, he can go through walls and everything because he's truly invisible. They say, well, it's just a mirage kind of thing where you can't see the guy because he reflects light in a different direction, in a different way. And so it's a kind of like a holographic kind of thing. And so the question is whether this invisibility is true. But what Michio Kaku is suggesting is that not only do you have invisible dark energy, invisible dark matter, now you have invisible dark mass. Whatever object is out there, mass, right? He can make it invisible too. And he's saying we're going to have this technology. And again, there's a big debate on whether the invisibility they talk about is the true invisibility. And the other thing is that a lot of this has been done with very small things that you can barely see. So it's not like you can get an elephant and say, oh, we're going to make him invisible. No, it's nothing like that. So if you're interested, research the subject, invisibility, invisibility cloak. Okay, and just to top it off, he's got this thing, Michio, good old Michio. He says, let me get this over here. He says, we now have computers that move objects. Is he kidding me? He's suggesting that computers can move things from a distance without touching them. Yeah, I want to see that. I want to see how we can move an elephant with a computer without touching it. I really got to see that. I want to see that magic trick. In the future, we'll have supercomputers based in different objects. So with the human mind, we'll activate a computer, which will in turn move objects around us. So he goes that extra step. He says, first, the computer moves things around today, and sometime in the future, with our mind, we'll be able to tell the computer to move the object. I don't know why we need the computer. We might as well do it directly if you can move an object, if you can talk to the computer with your mind and have the computer do something without getting even closer to it, well, then maybe we should just move the object directly. Why bother with the computer? Okay, so where does all this take us? Well, it takes us to his notion of where of why we haven't been contacted by civilizations, because he's a futurologist or a futurist. He's a guy who talks about what's going to come in the future, and that's a lot of what he talks about these days. That's what he gets his bucks for blabbing stuff, nonsense about, extrapolating nonsense from mathematics, from the world of mathematical physics into the real world. And he just takes that as a given, because on the one hand, they say they don't understand anything of what they're saying out there, but then all that physics, all those concepts that they developed, they introduced them into people, popularizations, as if they were real, if they've been proven and they exist and they can explain every single one of them. So this is the issue, whether, the question is whether these people do understand the world out there, and if like Feynman just said, we don't understand it, how can they extrapolate that, tell the people, the common people out there who are not too well versed in physics, why do they tell them these nonsense, these things that they this irrational philosophy that they have? Why do they tell them these things and tell them as if they were proven truth, when they, on the other hand, say we don't understand it ourselves? Okay. And so one of the things he talks about is the different levels of civilizations. He's saying that we're going to go out there and conquer first our planet, obviously. Then we're going to conquer the planet, such as Mars, etc. Then we're going to go to the stars. Then eventually we're going to go to the to the galaxy. We're going to conquer the entire galaxy. That means we're just going to spread throughout the stars in our galaxy. And I assume after that we go to another galaxy, right? What's going to stop us? And so he comes up with this Kardashev scale. And, that's Kardashian scale. I guess I got the wrong one. Now let's get the Kardashev scale, which is this guy over here. Okay. And what does the Kardashev scale say? Well, it says that there's at least three levels of organization, of evolution. This is what you can expect as a human, and this is what Michio Kaku vouches for. He says there's a type 1 civilization, also called a planetary civilization, can use and store all of the energy available on its planet, including earthquakes, hurricanes, tsunamis, everything you can think of, okay? Type 2 civilization, also called a stellar civilization, can use and control energy at the scale of its planetary system. And a type 3 civilization, also called a galactic civilization, can control energy at the scale of its entire host galaxy. And Michio says the following by this. That, by the way, the Kardashev scale came out of the Wikipedia, but here we have Michio. He says, by the time you reach type 2, you are immortal. Okay, let's see how he justifies that. He says, nothing known to science can destroy a type 2 civilization. What does he mention? Comets, meteors, earthquakes, even a supernova. See, this is what people think cause extinctions, mass extinctions. Some out of the sky, some astronomical catastrophe. And it never occurred to them that, that's why you see why I got into the extinction, because this is what these people believe. These are religious fanatics, that's all they are. And it says a type 2 civilization would be able to survive a supernova. The danger is the transition. This is the real danger, okay? The danger is the transition between type 0 and type 1, and that's where we are today. Michio Kaku says we are a type 0 civilization. We're still in our we're in our diapers. Okay, not even you can't even say that we're in our underwear. We're in our diapers. We're babies. We're a civilization that's just starting out. Okay, and so he explains why we haven't been visited by the aliens, or at least so far, right? As far as we know. And so he says this. He says the following. He says, let me get this up here. He says, we are a type 0 civilization. We got our energy from dead plants, okay, and coal and oil and coal, and we'll attain a type 1 status in about 100 years. So we're 100 years away from type 1 civilization. Hey, that's great. I'm going to miss it, I guess. My back can't wait 100 years. We'll harness all the energy of our planet, volcanoes, earthquakes, or hurricanes, okay? We're privileged to be alive and to witness the birth of type 1 technology, okay? And he says maybe that's the reason why we don't see aliens in our outer space. In outer space. Maybe one day when we have starships and visit them, okay, we'll see atmospheres that are irradiated because they had a nuclear war. Maybe we'll see the corpses of type 1 civilizations that never quite made it. Okay? So you see, this is the guy who supposedly uses his physics knowledge. Okay? He uses his physics knowledge to spread nonsense to the common folk out there. What does he spread? He spreads his extrapolation, not only his, but obviously of the entire guild. Okay, they come up with these nonsensical ideas about how the universe works. They have this space-time thingy, and they've already conceded that. They say they've proven it. They don't have to do any more work on that because there's nothing more they can do. What are they going to do? Prove it again? They've already proven space-time, so they take that for granted. It's just memorized by the new generations. They go to college, they just memorize, repeat what their professors told them. They mark D on the test and they pass. They get their degrees, and then they come up with further nonsense like Michio Kaku spitting out today. And what does he do? Well, he's no longer into physics. That's too boring. That's for the new generation of so-called physicists. No, he's moved on. He's a celebrity. He wants to make money now. What does he do? He gives talks. And what does he talk about? What are his dissertations about? The future. And what is the future? Well, if we don't destroy ourselves with nukes, and he hopes that we don't, then we're going to become a type 1 civilization. And that means we're going to be able to conquer the stars. And then from there we go to type 2 civilization, from where we're no longer, we're immortal. We can no longer die as a civilization. And from there we go to type 3 and conquer the entire galaxy. These are the notions these people have. And how about this difficult thing about beating the speed of light? Well, we'll just go through a wormhole, or we'll just go with a Mass Effect, just make a little hole through space-time and reach the other side of the universe in velocity of thought. You think, and you're already there. And so you can visit the Klingons, the Martians, whoever you want in split second. And how is this justified? Well, it's justified now lately. String theory, which has evolved in the last 40 years at least. And string theory is what? The vibration of strings, which are really the vibration of nothing. And that vibration of nothing makes the particles, which are used in quantum, because they had to incorporate quantum, otherwise the QM guys would get upset. What does any of this have to do with physics anymore? And this is what they feed the public. And the public, they don't care about all this. Public is completely apathetic. They don't care about all this nonsense. They just listen. They say, oh, okay. Is that what the mathematicians have proven, that we live in such a universe? It sounds a lot like the religion that we had, the traditional religions, where they built this world of, Eden and Adam and Eve and the garden and so on. There's no difference. There's absolutely no difference. These people are religious fanatics that have taken over science, over physics, and this is what they spread to the crowds. And the new generation just repeats whatever they come up with. A lot of people accept all that stuff. They see it in the games. They see it in the movies, in the series. And this guy is a celebrity. He makes millions preaching this nonsense. And how do you fight this? And I'm saying you can't. I'm saying we're stuck with this, because I can't imagine how this whole garbage, this nonsense that they call science, that they call physics, can be overthrown. I think it's beyond, humans have evolved science or mathematical physics to the point where we can't take it back anymore. We're beyond the point of no return. I cannot imagine how this can be overthrown. But if you have a better idea than me, bring it up next time. And I'll talk to you on Wednesday, see if anyone has any idea how to overthrow this. I think it's just collective dementia. Not dimension, dementia. It's collective dementia. That's what it is. And how this is propagated by people who have their feet off the ground. They're no longer in touch with reality. Their reality is so far from Mother Nature's reality that it's not even worth listening to them, again, only as stand-up comedians. Then yeah, if you don't take them seriously, it's okay. But if you think these people are for real, well, you're making a big mistake. Anyways, I'll see you on Wednesday. Maybe someone can come up with an idea how to overthrow this nonsense. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.